Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 DLFF Film Festival. And this year we're online. We had tried very, very hard to be in person, but that's okay. We will be flexible as we have all been flexible for the last 14 years. I'm very pleased to kick off the first of 4 roundtables with our talented screenwriters. I'm going to have them go around and introduce themselves and their project. And then I have a question for them, and then we'll probably just have a conversation and get to know them a little bit. And I think the goal of this this session is to not only present your project, but to inspire, okay, each other and our viewers. Okay, so in alphabetical order, we're gonna start with Matt. Could you introduce yourself and your project?
Yeah, my name is Matt Walker. My project's called Clown Fight. It is about a man, a construction worker whose sister goes missing. And once he starts investigating, he comes to find out that she's gotten sucked into this organization of underground clowning. People go around anonymously and perform clowning acts, traditional funny clowning acts. And the more he digs into it, he finds out there's a rival faction of people that go around and do the opposite, that try and scare people. And throughout this story, it eventually blows up into an all-out civil war between the 2 different factions. So it was a lot of fun to write. And the biggest problem I'm having with telling the story to everyone is it starts off like a horror story and then gets really, really silly. But yeah,
kind of like life. Okay, and hey, Patrick, let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself and also your project.
Hi, I'm Patrick Langille. I wrote He Never Really Left. Basics, it's a grieving couple who lost their teenage son, and through circumstances, ghost comes back to their house and he starts kind of acting as if he did when he was alive, and they kind of welcome him, but there's something not quite right that they notice about some things that happen in the community, and they wonder if maybe he's involved somehow, and maybe he's not quite the good kid that he once was. Basically, like, I kind of wrote it as more of like a drama than a horror movie, but it does become more of a horror movie as it goes along.
Again, just like life. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Todd, introduce yourself and your project, please.
Sure. My name is Todd Bronson, and I wrote Mistry, Cavern. And it's basically a coming-of-age creature feature. It's basically it's sort of like a Roger Corman movie. If you listen to grunge and he tripped on glowing carnivorous mushrooms. So it's really out there, but it's about 2 recently orphaned teens that basically fall in love at this abandoned roadside attraction set in Oregon. And it ends up being a military research facility of carnivorous mushrooms, and which is held below in a cavern. And basically it escapes, and the teens just try to survive and fight the military. So it's almost like taking a mushroom trip, to be honest with you. It's really bizarre. It's just,
but
I had fun writing.
Just because we're recording this, we're not promoting any illicit drug use, okay? Just so we're clear.
It is legal in Oregon.
Oh, so. Okay. So we'll all read it in Oregon. Okay. Okay, Pia, could you introduce yourself and your project?
Yes, hi, I'm Pia Thrasher, and I wrote Parcopresis, which is a really, really short, story. And it's basically, it starts out as a very innocent trip to a restroom, a public restroom. And I don't know how to really talk about it without giving much away because it's so short.
Yeah, don't give the spoiler, right?
So let's just say, you know how bathrooms have these very short, sometimes these barriers that have a huge gap underneath, and you never know who your next door neighbor might be in a stall. It's basically kind of dealing with that horror fear. It turns very nasty very quickly and very gruesome with a dark twist at the end.
Mark,
Yes.
can you introduce yourself and your project, please?
Sure. My name is Mark Donnell, and I wrote Ruined Vacation. It's actually a crime comedy, is what it is. What it is. There's snowbirds that travel from Canada and all over the United States, and they head to the southern states and live in RVs. So RV salesmen, they go there and do sales, like Quartzsite, Arizona is a big one. This takes place in Mesquite, Nevada. And it's just this crazy show team that goes there, and they don't know that the management of the show team is smuggling pharmaceutical drugs from Mexico in the black holding tanks of the trailers that come across because you can't smell it. And so anyways, it's just a comedy that I wrote because I traveled and sold RVs, and that's where all that came from. It turned out pretty good.
Excellent. And Sean, how about your
Yeah,
project?
sorry guys, I still can't get my video to work, but
That's
I'm
okay.
Sean Sullivan. I'm an art director and trying to be screenwriter. And in New Jersey, I work in New York City, and I was taking workshops, and I was workshopping with Jerry Przigian, who wrote The Golden Girls and The Jeffersons. And actually, in my very first workshop, Jerry wrote this a character outline, and I just really liked it, and I kind of gravitated towards it. And 7 years later, I pulled it out, and I wrote this story, Still the Champ. It's about, if you can imagine like an Evander Holyfield boxer type. The character is Zeke McBride, and he's like a sweet, big, lovable lug. It's a sitcom, and also he's now retired, but he has a trainer like Freddie Roach. So they're raising these 3 kids, 2 adopted kids, 1 Korean child, 1 African-American, and 1 natural son. So it's, the wife is now going back to work, and it's this kind of like, Evander Holyfield and Freddie Roach raising these 3 kids. And Freddie Roach is kind of teaching, the girl boxing. 1 detests boxing, 1 likes boxing, 1 idolizes Layla Ali. And she wants to become a boxer herself, so it's kind of like she's becoming like the next champ in a way. So that's
Great. And last but not least, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Younger. I wrote Witch's Brew, which is it's a World War II historical thriller. It's kind of a witch heist. It's about this group of vigilante witches who have to overcome I live in a disaster zone, so.
Wait, there's no crime in Vancouver.
Oh, there's plenty of crime in Vancouver. I shouldn't say that. I'm like a Canadian ambassador right now.
Yeah.
It's very nice that they were going to save a kitten up a tree. But yeah, so Witch's Brew is it's a heist thriller about a group of vigilante witches who have to overcome a family curse in order to prevent Hitler from invading England.
Very cool.
Great.
No pressure.
It's really interesting for me, at least, to hear the screenwriter describe their project. It's interesting to see what details come up and what maybe I recall or from a log line, and I think it evolves. You know what I mean? I think your description of your work evolves, and I think that kind of speaks to just the creative process. I think we're always thinking about our work. So I wanted to throw out a general question, and you can all chime in whenever, but I wanted to ask you specifically about inspiration. And I guess it's funny because I didn't want to focus on the last 14 months, but I would be curious to know if these were written pre or during. I'm assuming most of them were probably written before COVID, because I've seen a shift in the films, but I haven't really seen it in the screenplays. So any aspect of that you feel like chiming in? Hey, let's just keep going around in this alphabetical order. So Matt, a little bit about inspiration and anything that I brought up or anything you want to bring up.
Yeah, I guess just real briefly, the idea to do something with clowns was, it's certainly not a hot button issue, but you never see funny clowns anymore, and it seems like it was just something that got me thinking. My last project was a thriller, and so I wanted kind of a palate cleanser. And once I kind of went down the road, the idea of having these opposing sides and the idea of almost a himbo type of central character pitting two factions against each other, it was a lot of fun. As far as when I wrote it, I had started outlining before everything hit, but I finished. I think I finished the first draft late last year, so it's relatively fresh.
Yeah. And so you might have been influenced, whether you knew it or not, from what was going on in the world. What was really interesting is, so clowns have been kind of forced from strictly comedy to horror, whether it was conscious or not. So it was interesting to kind of see that element, because that's what the Die Laughing Film Festival was about. Like the whole genesis was just the fine line between horror and comedy, And what's amazing is sometimes when you're watching something or reading something and you're like, wait, is that like I have to look up, like, is that comedy or horror? Like, what have they submitted? Or so many times projects are like, we didn't know how to characterize this,
Right.
Yeah, so that comedy / horror is great. It's just, I think, the right balance. Patrick, first of all, I want to ask you, it's not directly like similar to your project in any means, but something that struck me was, have you watched that new show Servant on Apple?
I've heard of it. I haven't got a
Yeah.
chance to watch that yet.
I mean, in some really, really loose ways, your project reminded me of it when you started out. Oh, it's about grieving parents and stuff. That's
Okay.
like the premise of Servant as well. But
Okay, gotcha.
so and what would you like to say about inspiration for this project or in general, and the timeline, if you can remember that?
Okay, well, this idea actually came a few years ago when I was still probably in school, because I was thinking of ideas for shorts. This was probably originally going to be more of a dark comedy, where, like, same idea, grieving parents, their son comes back. But my idea for where it becomes like more of a dark comedy is they kind of get tired of him because he's like hosting parties for his friends and they won't leave. So they're just like, we gotta get rid of our son. So they hire like an exorcist or something. But then when the first lockdown happened, that's when I kind of went back to this idea and just thought, I want to write about people going through tragedy and kind of just show how life around them doesn't really care so much about them, and how that can really, because I mean, with going through the isolation too, like when some people just can't see their family or anybody, I kind of, yeah, like what if I could never see them again? Like what if I'm just
Right.
stuck? And it's like, and then like no one else seems like, everyone's kind of in their own bubble. No one really associates with anybody. So that's how I kind of wrote the father and the mother character, and I just tried to pull a little bit of my own experience too, because I never really wrote for like adult characters, because I mean they're kind of in their late 30s, so I just thought like, well, yeah, like I mean I'm getting older, so I should kind of focus on them, and like also his friends, like who also lost him. I wanted to involve them into the story as well.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when you look at the kind of the screenwriter and where they are in their life vis-a-vis the project. Not that there has to be a link, but more often not there are, and often just maybe subtle links that you're not even aware of, not necessarily aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, moving on. Todd.
The inspiration for mine.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm almost
I'm
afraid to know, but.
Oh. Basically, I wrote it during while I was off work due to the pandemic. I was writing another script and I was researching growing mushrooms. And I used to visit Oregon all the time. So it's basically a love letter to Oregon too, because I used to love going up there, and it just captures the whole experience of Oregon. So I started, after researching, I found out more about the genetics of mushrooms and everything. So I combined it into this basically trip to Oregon.
Literally trip.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for all the technical confusion, but we're just going to finish this round and then we'll focus on you. Okay. Let's see. Pia, was this based on a real life story? At least the bathroom part?
Well, kind of, yes. Yes, it's pretty easy. You sit in a strange restroom late at night in by the side of a freeway, and you're by yourself, and you hear weird noises next door, and you don't know what's going on there. So it kind of basically got inspired by my imagination always runs wild. Obviously, all writers have that, and so yeah, you think of the worst. What's the worst thing that could happen? So I went with it, and I wrote it like this was way before pandemic era. It was something that I had written years before, and I basically dusted off a few scripts because I'm also a filmmaker and I direct my own shorts, and so I thought maybe I'll try to film this one during lockdown because it's only like 2 characters, and but I decided
it would be manageable.
And so I dusted it off and worked on it a little bit during right at the beginning of this whole pandemic, and then I decided to just submit it to a few competitions and film festivals. And in the meantime I wrote and directed something else.
Oh, nice. You find out about that. It reminds me of just the that whole monster under the bed kind of feel, so it was like an updated version. Mark,
Sure.
so Mark, so it was interesting how I remember in your submission you pointed out and you mentioned today that you grew up wait, did you grow up around RVs? Something about your family was connected?
Actually, no, I was a car salesman.
Oh, okay.
And inspired by Robert Zemeckis' Used Cars, obviously.
Excellent.
And I wrote Extremely Used Cars. That was the opener for Die Laughing in 2015, I believe, the feature film. So you might look that up. And this is kind of a sequel to it, only it's 10 times better script. Because I evolved as a screenplay writer. So what happened was last year when I moved to Yuma, on the drive here, it was 1,200 miles, and I had all these ideas of these screenplays. So when I got here, I wrote 3 features. Of course, there was a pandemic, so I had nothing else to do, and then one TV series pilot called Hanford. It's about the nuclear problem up in Washington State. And then one of the show guys called me, and then we were just talking about crazy things that happened while we were on the road. And he wanted me to do another car movie type thing. And I wasn't into it. And when I hung up the phone, all of a sudden I had this vision of this screenplay. I'm like, let's do an RV one, and so I wrote the screenplay, and it kind of wrote itself. And I was tickled pink with it. I thought the thing is probably one of my best screenplays I've ever written. And I mean, it's doing really well in the festivals, and so are the other ones. The other 3 that I wrote have also won pretty well this year. So I've evolved as a screenplay writer. I thought I was a good screenplay writer, and this whole time for 20 years, and then all of a sudden the light bulb went off, and in the last year and a half, and then it just all came together, and
Well, maybe because, the benefit of just having the time to really buckle down and focus.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So the pandemic kind of helped in that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Silver lining. Okay, and Daniel, you want to address inspiration? Oh no, I'm sorry, Sean. You said something really interesting, Sean, about how you did the character outline 7 years ago, right?
Well, yeah, this was, I workshopped it with Jerry. My first workshop was with Jerry, and he did this character outline.
Mhm.
And I literally saved it for 7 years. And I've written like other stuff about myself and like putting myself in different scenarios and just writing other stories. I've written a bunch, but I kind of just came back to this and I was like, let me just write something. I'm not African American, I'm not Korean, but I love boxing, and I have a Korean nephew, and I'm a father of 2 girls. So I kind of just like used that and just kind of created, a kind of whole story, around this boxer who's retired. I guess it's a little bit of me like getting up in age and stuff, and kind of, dealing more with my kids.
Yeah.
So.
I really liked to hear that backstory, because I think it would have been a different project 7 years ago, for better or for worse. And I also like how, because you wrote it now, boxing is very different than it was even only 7 years ago.
You're right. Yeah.
And it opens up for, gender, in terms of gender. So I really like that. And it's just one of those things, in some ways, thank goodness you didn't start it 7 years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah. And Daniel, tell us about inspiration in general, or with this project. Hey, buddy.
In general is a big question, but for this one, it actually came from a podcast. I think it was just before the pandemic. But it was like, I forget what the name of the podcast was. I really wish I could shout them out right now.
Yeah.
But sort of, they do sort of like weird facts about history. And so
interesting.
This was the beginning of the pandemic, I think, like just before things started locking down. And I found out that there actually happened to be a coven of witches in World War II era who conspired together to perform a ritual to keep the Nazi forces from coming across the English Channel. And I was like, how the heck has someone not written this yet?
Yeah.
And so, in terms of inspiration, this one was kind of easy.
So like that anecdotal kind of historical fact triggered this.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
And I thought, like, how we've got a lot of World War II movies, but how many of them are about witches?
Did you find out any more information about that, like beyond what you heard?
I did some digging, like on Wikipedia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's largely like if you Google World War II witches stopping Hitler, like you'll find some stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, from there, just because I think I was a little bit afraid of like misrepresenting someone and potentially getting cursed by a real witch, so I decided to make everything up from there, right?
Yeah.
So
safest way. Okay, Michael Edwards, thank you for joining us. I'm so sorry for all the problems. Turn your mic on. I think I can turn your mic on. Maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. How are you, sir?
I'm doing.
You have your family helping you. Great.
Yes,
So,
yes,
Michael, we have 7 minutes left, or 8 minutes and 41 seconds. I want you to introduce yourself and your project. And the topic was inspiration, but you can address any aspect of your script that you like.
Okay. Thank you for having me on this Zoom meeting. I really enjoyed listening to all the writers. They are so good.
I noticed a thick Brooklyn accent.
Oh yeah, right. Come on. I'm getting my lasso out for you, buddy. You had it now. It's over. We're gonna drag you around the block. Guarantee. I'll give you my Louisiana guarantee on that one. I love you, man.
So tell us about Dellah's Wolves.
Well, I wrote a spy thriller called 30 Coins, and I did a lot of research about World War II, and I learned some things about these concentration camps that were just ugly. And so we finished that, and I wanted to write a horror story and use that background information. And I had Dellah and her dad and her lover escaped from Germany during World War II, go to Canada, and drop down to Georgia, where they started a lumber operation. Now, in this area, the government had an experiment going on at a pond that they had built, an artificial pond with a water tower, and they were feeding the fish the chemicals to make the fish grow big, fish grow fast. And they called from the government, said, look, we've got a bad batch. They're getting humps on their backs, and these fish are not fit to eat. Destroy them. And this is all during a big thunderstorm. And the guy opens the door, and about this time, lightning hits the water tower. It goes into the pond where the fish are, and electrocutes some of them, and the water waves, the water comes and washes away the little shack where the Rangers are in, and the fish blow over the edge of the pond dam, and that's the end of that scene. That's page one. We're on page one. It starts off with a bang, and then the wolves come to eat the fish, but there's another gang of wolves there in the fish. So they go around behind the pond dam, and there the forest rangers are hanging in the trees, and they eat the chemical straight out of the sacks. And these become the mutant wolves that Dellah trains.
Now, Michael, is that how you normally write? You start with kind of a flash of inspiration, and then you create a world around it?
Works for me.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think
it's like this. The log line is ex-Nazis. Dellah discovers a family of mutant wolves. She trains them to devour whoever she wants when she fires her Luger. Synopsis. Scientists use a generic chemical, fish grow fast, to experiment on making salmon grow to maturity quicker. After a storm destroys their experimental station, the wolves eat the fish grow fast chemical, then mutate. Dellah saves Big Bad from falling over a cliff, and they become friends. He leads the mutant pack to devour a meal when she fires her Luger as a signal. Peggy, African American, has timber rights leased alongside the ex-Nazis lumber operation. He sees the ex-Nazis beckon the wolves, then is witness to the killing of the black lumberjacks on their payday. Needless to say, hell had no fury compared to a pissed off black woman logger.
excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Normally at the festival, I always have the screenplays available for people to kind of peruse. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year, but we're going to do the best we can. We put so much effort in making our screenwriters feel welcome and a part of the festival. I've been to a lot of festivals, and a lot of times, I think the screenwriters don't get as much emphasis as they should. So I hope you enjoyed joining us. This will go online right away as we continue to promote the festival. Come back May 28th and 29th. All our films will be online for free for those 48 hours.
Okay, I've got one more thing I want to say.
Sure.
Come here, Kelsey. Come here, Kelsey. Come here.
Oh, is Kelsey a wolf?
This is Kelsey.
Oh.
She starred with several films with Danny Trejo.
Oh, yeah.
She's a co-writer in a brand new screenplay.
Excellent. Hi, Kelsey. I was afraid. I thought you were going to bring one of Dell's wolves on, and I would have to shut down this broadcast. Hi, nice to meet you.
You
Well,
as well.
okay, stay in touch with me and keep in touch with the Die Laughing Film Festival. Maybe we'll see some of your works eventually as part of the festival. Okay, but more importantly, I would love to see you guys in person as long as it's safe. Okay.
Oh, we want to be there in person.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
stay safe, stay well, continue to create. Thank you so much for sharing your time. And again, sorry for the technical snafu, but keep in touch. I really appreciate all your work, and we'll see you. I'm going to stop the recording.